So yeah, that's essentially the story behind how it came together, and obviously shooting the video and doing that, and then getting that out there, and really more than any of our other medleys, certainly having like unanimously positive feedback, and starting to get. I think at one point we got a note from one of Paul McCartney's daughters that she really loved it. And just most recently, we essentially have a line to Ringo now, which is cool. Through some of the other work we're doing in the Web3 space and everything, we had a chance to send a happy birthday video through to Ringo recently. And there's an opportunity on the table for us to actually do something officially with him and his camp at this point. So that'll be really cool to explore a little further.
Youngsters from Liverpool, England. The Beatles have held this title for 8 years.
My model of business is the Beatles. You know, they were four very talented guys.
Welcome back to the Here, There, and Everywhere podcast. I'm your host, Jack Lawless. Walk Off the Earth is a band from Ontario, Canada that is well known for their covers of popular music on YouTube, as well as their original songs. Their YouTube channel has over 4.35 million subscribers, and their videos have over 1 billion views. In February of 2020, the band released a video of them performing a live medley of Beatles hits in chronological order, spanning from 1962 to 1970. And here today to discuss the magic of Ringo Starr's drumming, why George Harrison's songs were so special, and how a certain Beatle is interested in future NFT and Web3 projects, is Joel Cassady of the band Walk Off the Earth. Joel, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, Joel, how did you first hear the Beatles?
Man, I wish I could jump back in time and get a pinpoint on it, but I know for sure it was in some way, shape, or form at a very young age. My pops definitely had tons of records, and I remember very vividly the Get Back 7-inch sitting on the table back at kind of our old house. I live up here in Toronto, Canada, from Paris, Ontario originally. I remember vividly back in the day. It's like a flashbulb childhood memory of that 7-inch with the Apple on it, just sitting there. And my pops did a great job of getting me into the Beatles and Yes and Zeppelin and a lot of that kind of music from his youth. Yeah, and that's kind of that's definitely as far back as I can remember the first moment of my pops showing me stuff and playing stuff for me and sort of getting into things that way.
That's awesome. And what were your first thoughts when you heard the Beatles?
I feel like it would have been such a young age, right? But I feel like it would have kind of slotted in right alongside some of that early stuff. And I think comparative to what I would have been listening to otherwise at the time, which would have been some mix of Sharon, Lois, and Bram up here in Canada, with like kids entertainers, or at that time quite possibly listening to that Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, just by not even by choice, just by what was on otherwise for pop music. I think it would have been. I was much more interested, certainly, in what my dad was showing me, and some Rick Wakeman stuff, and just some of that kind of like vintage stuff, and the whole vinyl experience and everything. And I just kind of have a nice kind of warm memory in general, maybe not even Beatles specific, but just in general of him, the process that was him showing me those old recordings that he liked, and certainly assigning an extra special level of value to those, just based on it being kind of this nice experience with my dad versus the kind of stuff that was on the radio those days, and everything else at that time we would have been listening to on CDs. Nice to kind of set up near the record player and have him show me the songs of his youth, which was, certainly made a mark on me. And it's, I feel like as life goes on for me, and as I fortunately enough have opportunity to do more and more as a full-time musician these days, I feel like those early kind of formative moments really continue to inspire and inform kind of the stuff that I do these days. So it's cool to think about.
So when did you decide to start pursuing music professionally with Walk Off the Earth?
Yeah, well, man, so going back to I think my first introduction to, I started piano pretty early. I started piano when I was 8, 9, 10. That was kind of, realistically, it was kind of my folks being let's get him into this. My mom was a trumpet soloist in drum corps back in the day. She spent her whole childhood on tour buses, much less glamorous, fortunately, than the ones that I've been able to be on. More just kind of almost like a coach bus, just traveling around Canada mostly, and a bit of the States, doing drum corps stuff. I think as I started to show a little more probably even stemming from my dad showing me those recordings and my folks getting me excited about music early on. My folks started to see a certain proclivity for that, so they kind of pushed me into piano, and I spent several years doing that, which gave me a nice foundation. But then I kind of hit those angsty teenage years, and I just wanted to get over to like rock instruments, like not the piano isn't, but yeah, I wanted to get to like drum kit and guitar and everything. And funny enough, I got to guitar first, and then I made it far enough into the secondary school experience where it came time to have like band class, and not everyone has that. I didn't realize that till after the fact, that not everyone has like a comprehensive band program where you can actually get a chance to play a drum kit or learn guitar or any of this sort of stuff. So at that time, funny enough, I was still really obsessed with guitar, but one thing led to another, and it came time in music class to dole out the rhythm section instruments. And of course, every hand went up when the teacher asked about any rhythm section instrument. And specifically, I got to shout out Miss Flanagan for this. Specifically, there was lots of kids that put up their hand for drums and guitar and piano and bass, but she said, if you have already played this instrument before, you're not allowed. We want to find people that are new to it. So there were a few kids that put up their hand for drum kit, and they didn't get it for that reason. I got it for that reason, and it ended up sending me on this whole path that has been this whole kind of career for me, which is wild. So the funny story that I tell is that like years after, once WOA took off, I ran into her at like a Shoppers Drug Mart, like a CVS up here, and I was like, Miss Flanagan, you're not gonna believe it. Like what you did back in the day. She was like, who are you? She didn't even recognize me. So I had to it took a little explaining, but that was always a funny moment. Yeah, that kind of started things, and the sort of happenstance or just kind of like luck of the draw nature of me getting stuck on drums ended up starting this whole journey for me where, you do the thing. Yes, you do music class, but you start jamming with your buddies and you start discovering music that way. And that just kind of continued until it came time, through high school with concert band and jazz band, and till it came time to where a lot of my buddies whose parents were a little more concerned, and rightfully so, because going into the arts is a pretty terrifying thing. I had a lot of buddies who I came up with in music whose folks were like, okay, cool, yeah, you had your fun, it's time to go to business school, or it's time to go to whatever else. They actually wouldn't, they were actively preventing their kids from wanting to pursue something that they otherwise would have wanted to do, which always tripped me, man, because it's like, I get it, especially based on certain cultural upbringings and various things about my parents grinded and came over to this country, so I need to make sure to have a more reliable job. I get all that stuff for sure, but it's for all those reasons and more that I'm especially grateful that my folks were always so happy to support the idea of me trying to pursue music at a schooling level, at a college university level. So that whole process led me to finishing high school, getting a chance actually to go on to my first international tours with some pretty small local sort of GTA Greater Toronto area artists kind of thing, which was wonderful for me, getting a chance to do that. But then ultimately kind of going to music school, going to Humber College here in the Toronto area, which is kind of like the best school in the country for. It's a lot of schools that will focus on jazz and stuff and various things, but Humber is known for kind of focusing on more contemporary music and sort of covering everything more than just a jazz focus, which was a great thing. But even then, something about it, after having a chance to really go out and see kind of do the real touring thing and getting a chance to really see that and feel that freedom, I stuck it out as long as I could. But I ended up starting to get calls and everything, not even for big gigs or anything, but just enough that it was going out and gigging in the city and going out and having a chance to go to Europe, even for like a not so well-funded tour, like a pretty kind of bare bones tour. That still was so much more satisfying and artistically fulfilling to me than the idea of kind of art school's weird, man. And for some folks it works so well, but the general idea that is be creative under these constraints and then get a rubric based mark for it is what a trip, right? And it's funny that I went to school with a few folks who kind of didn't do that great in school, but they've wound up being the guys that have gone on to some of the coolest stuff, right? So that always trips me too. But essentially that's the long-winded version of what kind of got me into it and getting into school and then getting out of school. And when I finally, I'll never forget this either, Mark Kelso, big shout out, the head of drums and percussion at Humber. I'll never forget sitting in his office after more and more of these gigs were happening for me and being like, dude, there's a huge disconnect happening here. And whereas I was terrified that he was going to say, listen, you got to stick it out, it's really important. He said, you agreed with me. Art school's weird. When I was your age, I got a chance to drop out of Humber and go on tour with Shaka Khan. I'm never going to tell any of my students not to go and get that because school's always going to be here. And I think I would have made the call either way, but to have that kind of blessing from easily the best drummer in Canada, one of the best in the world. He's phenomenal. He's played with everyone. Really was a big deal for me. So kind of having his blessing to go out and figure it out, and to go back home to my hometown of Burlington, Ontario at that time, and just start to kind of like dive more into the scene and get introduced, funny enough, to this band Walk Off the Earth that I had in previous bands in past shared stages with, the whole thing. But to chat with Johnny, who runs the band, at that time, we're talking like 2011 here, 2010, 2011, just based on a couple of YouTube videos and like 3,000 subscribers or something, there was already opportunities happening for Woat, because this is only a few years after like our buddy Justin Bieber from down the road here had been one of the first artists to kind of leverage YouTube to really kind of generate a large following and be able to kind of really take it to the next level. So just based on a few early videos, there was an offer on the table to go to the UK for a tour. And I said, hey, I actually was just, I was just out there, and I went to Europe with a local artist. Like, I would love to do that. That sounds a lot more appealing to me than hanging out in music school, for a couple more years. So I said, let's do it. And one thing led to another over the course of the first couple of years of just kind of doing the bar circuit here in Southern Ontario. We obviously were prioritizing more and more trying to make these videos, because there was clearly something to this YouTube thing that was allowing, it's really the first time in the internet era where where the playing field was leveled, right? Where any artist could like essentially throw something up on YouTube and quite possibly have it seen by the rest of the world instantly and be kind of like rocketed to a bunch of opportunities. So there we were doing our thing, and we did a handful of them before we did the Five People One Guitar, the Gautier cover, which, at the time absolutely did not feel any different than any of the other videos we'd been doing at the time. But I'll never forget like putting that video up. I had just recently got into Reddit at the time, and I'll never forget uploading that video, going to bed, waking up the next morning, opening Reddit and seeing our thing on the front page of Reddit as a Washington Post article, and being like, something's happening here. And like literally every day since then, that was January 5th, 2012, literally every day since, it's been a full-time gig. The amount of opportunities that have come our way, they continue to come our way. In some ways these days more than ever, just continues to blow our mind. It's like the most fortunate position to be in, and we're still going, man. Despite a lot of things, a lot of ups and downs along the way, we're still ripping, and it's truly a pleasure and an honor. Because one of the biggest things you learn when you get a chance to start going around and touring the world, man, and like being introduced to all these incredible artists, is that like there's so much talent out there that's untapped, that's undiscovered, and for some reason we got a chance to do it. We're not the most talented, we're not the most deserving, but for some reason we got a chance to be in that position. So I feel like we default to just grinding on, at any given time we have like 5 or 10 stokes in the fire, because I feel like, especially in this kind of ever more and more emergent attention economy, right, where like if we're not capturing someone's attention or trying to find new audience or find new fans, someone else is. And we know that damn well after making laps around the world and seeing how like bands that have opened for us that were like, you guys are unbelievable, like how, and we'll do our thing, we'll use our platform to try and help those artists. And we've fortunately over the years been able to help kind of elevate and give some other artists their start and everything. But that's something that I think, just like without even thinking about it, we default to, because there's so much talent out there, and here we are with this continued opportunity, so we better not screw it up, kind of thing.
Wow, that is a really fascinating story. And the music you guys make is just really fascinating as well. I mean, I've been a subscriber to you guys since I think 2012 or
Cool,
something
man.
like that.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite projects that you guys have done is the 6-minute long Beatles medley that you released 2 years ago.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
What inspired you guys to make that?
Well, we pretty early on, we started to kind of get the vibe that the medley approach was something that people really enjoyed, especially like it's one thing for us to kind of like, we do everything ourselves, right? So it's one thing for us to like get in our studio and just like come up with a crazy arrangement and basically conceptualize and execute the video side of things. But some of the other kind of medleys we had going at the time, we were really getting a huge amount of positive feedback, especially like performing them live. So that really kind of started to cement in our brains, like this is clearly something we should always be kind of working on a medley. And I know that the couple years prior, like that thing was in the works for forever, man. And because it was never the priority, we were on the road, we were juggling projects, but it was always this thing where we wanted to make sure that if we were gonna come out with not just the Beatles cover, because we'd done a couple things in past, like a little less formal. If we were going to come out with this Beatles medley, especially once we decided to do it chronologically, we wanted to make sure that the arrangement was absolutely really special. We were actually contributing something to the veritable sea of Beatles covers and Beatles arrangements and things like that, right? So we really took the time. It was probably a 2+ year process of it being on the back burner, and us, once we'd wrap a certain project, we would log a few hours late at night on the arrangement, and it finally kind of slotted into a nice spot where we sent it around to our usual kind of set of trusted listeners, and they were like, guys, this arrangement is nuts. Like, the transitions are crazy. And we were like, we thought so too. We just never know for sure. So, the whole artist thing where you're either like fully yourself or think that you're the worst artist in the world. So
Right.
always good to get that trusted feedback. But essentially that was that. And we finally got to the point where we were ready to shoot the video, and it was a blast, man. We had our buddy Gareth, who's an awesome piano player from the area, come in. We love to have we love to collaborate. We love to bring artists in for a certain kind of 1 or 2 videos at a time or kind of thing, and our guy Gareth really helped us out. He helped us out with some of the vocal arranging too. He's just like a really kind of really advanced harmony guy. All of us are very much self-taught, and the extent of my study was at Humber, and the couple of years beforehand that I took drum lessons for the first time. I'm like by far the most schooled of the group. Everybody else is very much kind of self-taught. So it's nice to always have a bit of a hand on the harmony side. At the same time, we also like pride ourselves on just like essentially dicking around with harmony options. Potentially they're not correct, but obviously sometimes that still works. There's really no rules, right? So yeah, that's essentially the story behind how it came together, and obviously shooting the video and doing that, and then getting that out there, and really more than any of our other medleys, certainly having like unanimously positive feedback, and starting to get, I think at one point we got a note from one of Paul McCartney's daughters that she really loved it. And just most recently we essentially have a line to Ringo now, which is cool. We can get into that later, but we, through some of the other work we're doing in the Web3 space and everything, we had a chance to send a happy birthday video through to Ringo recently, and there's an opportunity on the table for us to actually do something officially with him and his camp at this point. So that'll be really cool to explore a little further. And it's just so wild, man, to be in a position where we were introduced to the vast majority of the world as this cover band, right? And that's a blessing and a curse, because there we were with all eyes on us for a while. But the local support for us was like, these guys also have some pretty awesome originals, and to have all the eyes on, to have basically our pick of record labels and opportunities like that was a wild thing. But also a really important moment for us to be like, yes, that's great that people know us as this kind of like viral cover band, but we want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to get our originals out there too. So to kind of like, and that's really set the tone for this kind of like 1-2 punch of ours, where we're never going to stop covering songs. We love it. It doesn't affect the ego at all. Like we know that it's the reason why we're here. At the same time, we've been able to have gold and platinum records with our original stuff. So it's like, there's no better feeling than that, to be able to be in that position and now have other artists start to cover our tunes. But I was going to say there, another cool thing is basically just to be at a point where we cover a tune, and 9 times out of 10, that original artist will wind up hitting us up and saying, they either love it or they hate it. There's been a few haters over the years. There's been a few actually videos that we had to take down because the original artist just wasn't feeling it, which is, hey, you gotta be ready for that. But like 9 times out of 10, it's this like really amicable, really positive thing. And that's never not going to be a trip, I feel, to like be in the position where we just, a couple months ago, we're doing more short form stuff now because of TikTok and Reels and how big that stuff is. We did a Lil Nas X thing on our crazy Gear Harpalele with kazoos of his tune Industry Baby, and like the next day it's up on his story and he's talking about like that's how quickly that sort of stuff happens for us these days. And what a wild position to be in. It will never not trip me out that's the level of kind of like eyes that are on us at this point. So it's pressure, but it's good pressure. I think we don't know any other way at this point than to kind of know that pressure is on us and know that sort of judgment is going to be there, and we better nail it, kind of thing. So it's good.
That's incredible. It's just incredible. I mean, did you guys have any idea that you would be at this position 10 years ago when you started YouTube?
Not at all, man. Like I was really just a kid who my whole life led me to music school, and when I got there and it wasn't the vibe for me, like full honesty, when I left music school, and yes, I got a chance to I got to drop out to go on tour and stuff, but when I got back home to Burlington, Ontario after that, I hit a real low. Like my mental health kind of crashed because I was like, well, what now? Like, it's, do I really want to do this kind of freelance thing? I had tons of buddies from music school doing the wedding thing, doing the bar circuit, the whole thing, and I'd done a good amount of that as well. But I was starting to realize, especially after getting a taste to go to Europe and perform out there, I was like, I don't want to really do like the freelance thing. Like, I really want to try and find a group. So I was so grateful to get into that. But certainly, of course, there's that part of me that, like, I come from the era that, like, pretty much myself and any of my buddies who I came up with in music wanted to be either part of Blink 182 or Green Day or Sum 41 or that whole kind of era, right? So I just wanted to be Travis Barker. So, like, for me, the pie in the sky, the blue sky scenario was to just be a full-time rock star drummer in a band full time, right? So to get a chance to do that alone was something that, like, I feel like, especially back then, I'm like, I would have been able to die happy. But to get more and more into this world with Woad and into this kind of multimedia space where, because obviously as a YouTube born act, you're almost known just as much for your visuals and what's happening visually as you are with what's going on with your music, right? Like orally. So that was always an interesting thing as far as starting to get brands approaching us, and like something where we've always kind of had a leg up. We know a lot of bands that primarily will just go in the studio, go on the road, studio, road, right? That's their kind of main, if only, revenue drivers. And here we are in a position where these days we work with brands all the time. We do lots of corporate gigs. Yeah, of course, we still go out in the road. We still do big performances and everything. But to have that stuff going, and to be like, we're just wrapping up the first season of a fully greenlit animated show that we got fully funded through the pandemic on, that's going to wind up on like a Disney Plus or a Netflix. And like those sort of opportunities, and getting a chance to like kind of crack into the almost more like film and television space a little more, is something that I never would have thought about. I never would have thought that I'd be signing a deal involving licensing elements of my own biographical nature, because they're making a show about us. We're making a show called Walk Off the Earth in Space that's essentially like an all ages Rick and Morty, if you know that show, where we're a band that gets sucked up into space, and it's like infinite writing potential, because every episode we just kind of like one thing leads to another. We wind up on some new planet, and we have to get ourselves out of some hijinks, and there's an original song every episode. We're tapping some like awesome cameos and stuff, and like that's been a huge bit of work for us that's been so exciting and fulfilling that I never would have thought. So certainly, beyond the initial opportunity of getting a chance to do it, and obviously at that time, back in the day, having done some gigs and stuff, yes, I thought, oh, this Woat thing could be like the biggest opportunity for me. Like, maybe we can play some bigger shows and really go on some tours. This will be cool. Absolutely not that I think it was going to turn into a full-time thing and then some for us, where the amount of opportunities, both related to and not related to music, were going to just come our way and continue to come our way a decade on to this point, which is like a real blessing, because it's not easy to create longevity in this industry. And if there was one thing I could say that we've done a pretty good job of, it's been like just fighting, like I mentioned earlier, to just keep that staying power alive and just keep in people's faces, because we know that we don't want to go back to the way things were. We've been given this opportunity, and like we've been holding on to it for dear life for the last decade, and we don't intend to give it up anytime soon.
That is awesome. Congratulations on everything. I'm so happy for you guys.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So I'm wondering, did the Beatles have any influence on your mindset during those years, or on your life outside of music?
I mean, I think like if you're a songwriter, and I never was. I've become a songwriter more and more through this process, and it's been really cool to kind of grow that way while growing kind of in other ways the whole time. I think there's no way to not, like, there's if you're gonna be a songwriter and try to be good at it, there's no way to not do a deep dive into the way that the Beatles approached their songwriting process and approached essentially their way of creating music. Like that's the gold standard. So there's definitely been moments over the years where we've kind of done case studies and done our own little kind of bits of research on writing process that way, and really just referencing, like, I feel like we wind up referencing both at like an audio spectrum level when we're working on mixes and masters and stuff, but also like just a compositional level. Like, we've done these just basically just laying out the tunes, and like the interesting little bar or two here, or a little weird time signature there. Like, these are certain things that the Beatles did so well. As far as like the weird stuff, we love to like bake in weird stuff. The ideal is to kind of cook something in there that's super weird objectively, but that your average listener isn't even gonna really notice, not in a bad way, in a way that's like, yes, we're going to hit you with like some weird odd meter stuff or some weird key change stuff, or like throw a random bar of two or three in there to kind of transition to the next part. That's the sort of stuff where if you do it right and you're not going for like a Dream Theater or like a Tool thing, like where you can really kind of like, it's funny, like my partner Carly, she's a perfect person that I love to run stuff that we're working on by, because she has no musical background, and that's more representative of the average consumer than not. So it's nice to like be working on something that might have some really weird or kind of wild things in it, and run that by her or some other trusted listeners that we have, and they say like the extent of their feedback will be like, oh, it's great, oh, it's really dancey, oh, it's really I can move to it. Something like that is really valuable to us, because that tells us we've done it right. And of course, the Beatles have been have informed us hugely on what to get away with, sort of thing. Much as like, as mentioned, like I'm by far the most schooled, and like the idea of kind of knowing the rules before you can break the rules, I would really be the only one in that category, because for the likes of G and Sarah, like it's they've been just kind of breaking the rules by default the whole time. So it's cool to like this many years in, and this many songs in, and this many releases in, it's cool to like be able to know kind of what works best for us and know what process works best for us, but to always kind of keep an eye on like what paved the way for this era of modern music. And there's no group that kind of paved the way more than the Beatles, of course. So that's definitely been like a regular check-in for us, and something that I bet informs us more than we even realize, even talking about it and thinking about it now, more than we even realize, just based on the significant influence that those guys and their writing style and their ability to kind of do wild stuff within reason in the context of pop or popular music is amazing. So I mean, totally. I feel like I'm giving you like the most like roundabout, long-winded answers, dude, but that's, I don't know how else to do it.
Well, no, I mean, that's what happens with the Beatles. I mean, there's just so
Yeah.
much to talk about, so we can literally talk forever about this.
Yeah.
So as someone who plays the drums professionally, what's your opinion on Ringo's drumming?
I love it, man. It's funny when people, I mean, obviously there's been like people have, there's mixed opinions there and whatnot, and it's like the value and importance of simplicity is another thing that you really come to learn when you're in a fortunate position where you're able to kind of release stuff to the masses and have a pretty significant platform to do so. It's funny, like the simple elegance side of things, you really start to realize that more and more. And I think at a time where the likes of the Keith Moons and the John Bonhams of the world, we're getting tons of praise for being like chops monsters and everything. I have so much respect for Ringo for holding it down, whether that is rooted in a potential lack of like next level chops and skill, or whether that is a more kind of musical and really thought about decision to underplay, to let kind of the other elements of a song come through. I've always had crazy appreciation for, I guess it's that simple elegance and that underplay for in the interest of the quality of the overall composition and recording to be there. It's my Mark Kelso, who I mentioned at Humber, he used to tell us something like, he's like, the amount of times that I've been paid to perform a drum solo, I can count on one hand. And this is a guy who like has played with everyone. So that's always stuck with me too, is like, yes, you can do that. And yes, if you want to be like super music geek guy, there's a whole world for that, more so than ever these days. If you want to just nerd out and chops out and everything. But at a certain point, are you trying to make music that as many people as possible can relate to and can really have this sort of like have their heart in, or are you trying to kind of more appeal to the sort of music for musicians crowd, right? So I think it's always that discussion, and certainly it's very clear that Ringo from day one was more, again, whether and this, I actually, you may know this, whether it was more rooted in a lack of ability to shred like that, or he's got chops that no one's ever seen, but it's the sophistication for him where it's like, I'm gonna add only what I need to contribute my flavor to this piece and nothing more,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think all of his drum parts were very intentional. I think they were all precise.
Yeah.
And I think they were just what the song needed. I mean, I don't think the Beatles would have worked if Keith Moon was the drummer, because the Beatles didn't make songs like that.
That's wild to think about. Imagine if like Keith Moon or John Bonham went up in the Beatles, like who knows?
Yeah, right?
Wow. Yeah. Or if Pete Best stuck around, like, you never know, man.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy to think about the alternatives. I mean, I know Paul McCartney actually has a version of one of his songs with John Bonham on drums. The song's called Beware My Love, and it's on Wings at the Speed of Sound.
I got to make a note on this.
And yeah, I'll send you the link to it. It's actually like really cool.
No way.
Yeah, totally.
Sweet. Which I guess was sort I can only assume part of Paul's uh kind of artistic journey with Wings and beyond, right? Is to that the Beatles are like there's no more solidified musical brand than the Beatles at that point. So like to start to venture out a little bit, that's props to Paul for that, because that's cool. I didn't know that Bonham was actually on something of his though. That's so cool.
Yes, totally. I highly recommend listening to
Yeah.
it. And speaking of drumming, I'm wondering which Beatles song do you think has the most impressive drum part?
Ooh. That's a toughie. I know that like I have another very vivid memory of doing, actually, funny enough, a George Harrison medley I guess it would have been concert band, jazz band in I think the jazz connotation was a little loose. Jazz band in high school, doing something like that involved "Here Comes the Sun," that involved, oh my god, I'm gonna butcher it. There was three tunes in there, while my guitar was certainly in there, and something probably. And I know like the first time that I really got a chance to dive deep into Here Comes the Sun was a really cool, and the little odd meter section and stuff and little things like that. And the way that the fills, that was one of my first kind of mainstream and pop introductions to the idea of like, this is getting a slightly music geeky, but essentially like the idea of playing over the bar line as a drummer, where there's a way to basically make it very obvious that like, okay, here's the top of the next bar, here's the top of the next section, but the idea of being able to kind of obscure a little bit, right? This is like within reason, again, not at the Dream Theater and Tool level, but like to obscure kind of where that downbeat is, especially when you're working with kind of interesting sequential odd meter stuff like Here Comes the Sun does. I was really impressed by that stuff, because there is some kind of objectively awesome fills and objectively awesome playing in there, but I was really impressed by some of the really slick, subtle sort of ways that Ringo was able to kind of, and this goes back to the idea of making something more listenable and appealing and appetizing to the every person crowd, that can still have some really cool bells and whistles under the hood, but you don't need to necessarily mark those very blatantly. Because I feel like if there's a way to go about playing through Here Comes the Sun and those kind of there's a way to do that would be a little more jarring to the listener, but I think just it's a nice happy medium of like doing the kind of like music geeky side, but also being like, this is for everyone. Everyone can kind of get behind this, and it's not going to derail any listener kind of thing.
Right.
So I always had a lot of respect for that, and that was actually on the topic of kind of discovering the Beatles and getting a chance to kind of go deep and that sort of stuff. That was a big moment for me, doing that George Harrison medley and being like, these guys really have some really neat stuff going on here. So yeah.
Awesome. And would you say that is your favorite memory associated with the Beatles, or do you have another one?
Well, it's funny, man. Getting into Wout, like it's we did a festival in Belgium called Rock Werchter out there a few years ago, and Paul was the big headliner, and we got a chance we literally ran into him backstage. We had just finished our set at like a different stage, massive festival, and we were back trying to get ourselves to the front of house area where we were able to stand to watch Paul play, and we're like rushing around. We don't want to be late, and we're like literally just kind of like turning around the corners, and we smacked into Paul and like these like two bodyguard guys, and he just kind of laughed and he winked at us, and he went on, and then we got a chance to actually see, my first time ever seeing, and we're still kind of riding the buzz of just having played for like 15,000 people, still riding that buzz, getting a chance to see him do his solo thing for the first time, which was such an awesome experience, because it's so clear, and you would hope that anybody at that level would do the same thing, in their later years. It's clear that he just would, all the songs are there, but the beauty of live performance is kind of having fun with the arrangements and really just bringing in great players. And it's so clear that like the bands that he puts together are just like top. I think it was like Pino Palladino on bass, and I forget the drummer, but it's one of his longtime guys that's just like an absolute Jeff, possibly something like just a total blast. And like everyone on stage was just beaming, smiling the whole time. And that really, really translates, right? And that was just a very cool experience to actually have like just said hi to the guy, and then actually be right out there in the kind of special area that we were only able to stand in because we had our wristbands from just playing, able to kind of get the full front of house experience that way. And that was a great one. And then, as I mentioned, man, we one of several things we're also working on these days is kind of like exploring and finding our footing in the wild world of Web3 and kind of this decentralized internet that we're getting towards, where really, I mean, there's lots of noise right now. There's lots of bad information circulating. But at the end of the day, and the thing that really appeals to us is that we see huge parallels to what happened for us 10 years ago on YouTube. That was the first time where artists could start to sidestep the middleman or even the big gatekeepers in a pretty significant way, right? Like we were able to, when we showed up to Columbia Records office and every label in the States that wanted to sign us after our video blew up, we came in there with an audience that we had organically grown ourselves via YouTube. That scenario really more often than not used to look like some group that was just like their only way out would have been like, you know, signing the big deal and some guy in his suit showing up to their jam space and saying, guys, you've made it, sign here, here, and here, and you're going to be a star. And obviously we know how a lot of those deals wind up kind of going sour and being kind of really predatory and the whole mess that way. So to have our own organic following at that time and to be sitting in meetings with the likes of L.A. Reid in New York City at the Sony building and Mike Caron out at Warner and like these big heavyweights who've done massive things, to be sitting there showing them our stuff and saying, we don't need you. Like essentially the ball was in our court, and that was a big moment. And so when we think about what's happening now with, not sure how familiar you might be with like non-fungible tokens or DAOs and these sorts of things, where essentially we're getting into an era, once again, there's a lot of noise right now and there's a lot of terrible out of context headlines about it's all bad for the environment and it's all full of scams. It's funny that this space tends to really solve a lot of stuff that right now people seem to think that it's kind of like not doing a good job of. But what really appeals to us is that the whole idea, in the same way that Walk Off the Earth, starting a YouTube channel 10 years ago and being able to just organically discover fans and bring them together and then kind of bring them into the inside track and use social media to kind of like find cool and unique ways to monetize that, but also provide experiences that are like closer than a fan or an audience member had ever been able to get to that artist, right? I think the idea of these days we've kind of traded away making tons of money on record sales, which is just not a thing anymore. Back in the day with physicals, it was such a thing. These days, that's kind of gone, and that's been traded away in the interest of we want to be favored by the Spotify, the Apple Music algorithm that much more. So because that's not really a monetizable, a big earner, how do we monetize? We monetize by providing experiences to our most loyal fans to really be a part of the journey with us, whether that looks like a behind the scenes thing, or like on our Patreon, where we'll do like a members only chat every month, where people can suggest new covers and video ideas. We'll exclusive releases to those people. This sort of stuff where you can really bring your audience along with you and like provide a real kind of experiential thing for them. And there's no more exciting thing than when you're a huge fan of something to be able to really be essentially in a certain sense like co-creating or just like really along for that journey with them. So getting into Web3 and getting into there being even less gatekeepers and even less people with their hands in your pockets than ever right now, it's super exciting to us. And more than because we are in a fortunate position to have already kind of made it and be in position we're in. I touched on before the idea of having a chance to like elevate other creators and other artists, right? And there's, once again, there's never been a better chance to do that, to essentially help introduce really like a rising talent to the world. And then if they wind up building a fan base, they can take that fan base, they can tokenize that fan base, they can essentially put together a community of folks who, if they're not down to put a few bucks down in the name of supporting this artist, there's a lot of really cool stuff that can happen completely decentralized from the major label system and the kind of big bad evil world that operates that way, that for the longest time has kind of had the stronghold on music, right? And entertainment kind of more broadly. So we're really excited about that. And I guess long story short, that getting more and more into that realm got us aligned to Ringo, because I was out in New York for a conference called NFT NYC that myself and my partner Ross spoke at a couple months back, actually right before we did Carnegie Hall with the band, which was incredible. But I got a chance to meet this guy named Jake, who just happened to be a fan of Woat, and then one thing led to another. He was like, hey, we're actually about to fly out to LA for Ringo's birthday, and we're doing this kind of cool thing where Spatial is like an OG company that used to kind of focus more on like AR and like augmented reality, and these days more and more they're calling it XR expanded reality, is the kind of mix of AR and VR. They're doing these things that involve metaverse tech and essentially concerts where this sort of stuff, concerts where like you can be there in person, but if you can't make it, you can also kind of be there virtually, this sort of stuff. Ringo did a whole thing with them, and they asked us to essentially submit a video for Ringo, wishing him happy birthday, saying, hey, we love you, and we'd love you to check out kind of some of the stuff we've done with your music. And they were able to send him the Beatles medley, and also I think a video of us performing it. We've been playing it out for the last while at Carnegie Hall. So he received this kind of whole little package of stuff from us, and we heard some very positive feedback from that. So if we next time we're out in LA, we're down there quite a bit. Who knows, man? I don't want to I don't want to count any chickens, but it sounds like we might have a chance to really do something with Ringo officially. So that's pretty cool.
What? Oh, that is
Yeah.
fantastic, dude. That is so awesome.
Yeah.
So what's the timeline for the Web3 involvement for you guys?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, man. It's like the timeline. What a funny question, because the space, like, I feel like my dad's like a Web 1 OG. My dad's like an early internet kind of guy, and I see the parallels to what my dad's always told me so heavily. Like, it's as far as the space moving and evolving so rapidly, and people just trying to hold on for dear life, and like trying to find the right use case and trying to find the right essentially way to kind of help illustrate this for people. Us as a mainstream band, like we never would have thought we were in for, because you go into everything with good intentions, and like and we went in with really good research and stuff, and like, I guess long story short, Ross Vinokur, who's the co-creator of our animated series, is a really well connected ex-Hollywood guy who has tons of successes in Hollywood. The first thing he ever sold was to Steven Spielberg when he first moved to LA. Like, he's done big stuff. He's done big stuff on Netflix and Amazon, but he made a decision certain amount of years in to say, I'm sick of signing those predatory deals and those bad things that involve me signing my IP away and letting some executive essentially bastardize my IP, right? That's like a nightmare for a creator, right? So he had been operating in the more kind of like independently financed film and television space for a while. We got our show greenlit through the pandemic. Him and I get chatting. He tells me about his buddy John Cleese. If you know who John Cleese is from Monty Python,
Of course, yeah.
He's worked with on a bunch of projects. He and John Cleese did this NFT project in the middle of the pandemic called John Cleese Draws the Brooklyn Bridge, where John Cleese literally just called him one day, flew him out to his like compound in Phoenix, Arizona, and they just shot this whole campaign. And Ross describes it as like they couldn't have done more things wrong, but that's the best way to also learn a ton about what's going on in this space. And him and I get chatting. Turns out he has recently written a holiday novel for his daughters that he was already in talks with Random House to get published. And he was starting to, just through talking with them, was starting to get echoes of like, these guys are going to take my shit and mess with it. And he was like, there's got to be a better way. There he is, learning about kind of the NFT space and the implications of being able to kind of like fund things and produce things in a decentralized way. He had no idea that me, as like a diehard art lover, I had one of my favorite artists, Daniel Arsham, earlier last year had said, hey, and I'm so grateful for this, because there's no better use case to illustrate why this stuff is different and exciting. He said, hey, I'm actually creating pieces that, because they operate on something called a smart contract, can actually change over time. So right away I was like, that's not normal. That like the painting that I have on my wall can't do that. So that right away I was really into that. Essentially, him and I came together, conceptualized this thing that we're calling the Holiday Verse, and we are on this mission to figure out how to get the audience that we both already operate within, what's known as the 4-quadrant crowd, the mothers, fathers, families, children, that kind of like that full family crowd that we already have success in. Fortunately enough, we want to get that demographic into this space, whether we have to Trojan horse them into it or not. And that's kind of where the wild experience of the last year comes in, where we went out there really strong and excited about NFTs and all this sort of stuff, having no idea that the headlines and the people that haven't actually done the research or really seen and understood the implications of how powerful this tech can be just see the headlines. And we just got roasted like crazy from like all of our people telling us that they've like been fans of us forever, and now they're not a fan anymore. Like it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of negative feedback we got, and that has only kind of strengthened our mission even more. And it's fast forward. We essentially minted a project in December, and here we are in September, where we've had to make many adjustments and pivots the whole way along, but are now in talks with some pretty big, more Web 2 contacts that we and Wout have, and that Ross has in his network, where we're now, I can't give too much away, but essentially there's a few different like cinema brands and various things that want to partner with us to help get our IP and get the characters in these stories of ours out to the masses by any means necessary, kind of thing, because they believe in what we're doing. And the larger context of the idea of us being able to make decentralized kind of top tier animation, which we're already doing with Woat in Space, and that kind of brings us all together, is the idea of, back to the topic of elevating undiscovered creators, right? We have this idea of the Holidayverse, where we want to create films essentially that we're soundtracking, and actually this first one, Ornamental, is where myself and my bandmates are going to be the lead voices of, but we're casting. We just went live today with voting on our first round of casting community roles for our token holders to have a chance to be in the film, and this sort of stuff. All that sort of stuff really kind of excites us. And longer term, the idea of, and it's already started to happen, meeting and identifying creators that are from other communities, other cultural communities. To use December as an example, I mean, this holiday is year round, but like, Diwali, Kwanzaa, for example, the average white kid from North America doesn't know anything about those holidays. And we're not about to try and tell those stories and whitewash them. We're actually identifying people from those communities who are prospective screenwriters, composers, whatever it is, that we can actually start to work with and say, hey, we're going to help mentor you and coach you to get your story out there. That's the longer term vision of this, is to actually start to spread education and awareness through these kind of authentic cultural stories that we can be a part of, and really that kind of collaborative vision. It ticks like every box for us: the independent side, the collaborative side, the ability to essentially get high quality stories out there in a way that hasn't been too fuddled with at the kind of gatekeeper level, right? That kind of all just pays back into the ethos of WOTE, and it's something that we're really excited about, that we're going to continue to grind at, because we know that, just like with Web 1, when Web 1 first hit, nobody wanted to use the internet. People thought it was all scams, and because there was a lot of that, as with any new advent, right? But when you get past that first chunk of kind of the infancy of it, and you start to see these kind of more global use cases and things that are kind of more suited to the every person, that's when things are going to get exciting. At current, the whole space is like 20-year-old kids, they're known as degens, trying to just flip Bored Apes and like the big projects and everything and get rich quickly. That's going to go away very soon. That's not how we get the masses in. So we're working very hard and dialing all of our contacts. Fortunately, with WOTE, we have a lot on the music side. Fortunately, Ross has huge contacts on the more film and television side. We're basically fighting the good fight to try and get as many people in our corner to be able to really figure this out. And it's our belief that if we can corner even a small percentage of that market, that yes, it'll be an incredible opportunity for us on on the more financial leading side. But that is what it is. We already have, fortunately enough, solid careers. We don't need that. What drives us most is the idea of getting into the career making business eventually, where we can actually help to identify and uplift and give an opportunity to other independent creators that haven't had their moment yet.
That is just so cool. I mean, that reminds me a lot of when the Beatles started their own record label.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to give artists a better chance at being discovered. And, everybody gets heat for trying something different. I mean, look at Dylan getting heat for going electric in 1965. And, even Ringo caught a lot of backlash when he announced the whole Web3 projects.
Yeah, of course, dude. It's no, you can't escape it. Anyone who has like a predominantly mainstream following is getting roasted. But it's like, cool, like that's fine. I'm gonna screenshot this, and a year from now, when it's funny, right? Because like NFT, I think that the 3-letter term is gonna go away. Like I didn't even know fungible was a word before this, but like once our receipts, our land deeds, our vehicle ownership, everything that already should be a digital document first and foremost, that can be verified on blockchain on an immutable public ledger, where you can actually see where something has come from and prove in a way that is more inarguable than the idea of having a paper document. That's when people are going to start to have that moment, we think, right? Where it's like, oh, these things that I'm already interacting with on a day-to-day basis, that's what we're talking about here. So getting away, hindsight 2020, getting away from leading with non-fungible token and leading with kind of the weirdness of this side. Ross, my partner, said it best. We were on a panel at NFT NYC with some other entertainment projects, and he said the idea of, at this stage, trying to get the masses excited about like leading with the kind of mechanics of it, leading with the NFT side of it, is like if we were in Web 1 trying to get people excited about coding and C language, like, right? Nobody cares about that. That's so niche. So now we've learned, of course, you're always learning, always hindsight 2020, but now we know what not to lead with, and we're already starting to see the benefit in leading more with, hey, we're creating we already tell stories for a living. We already make art for a living. We're now doing that in a way that once we get people excited about it, sure, then we can let them know, by the way, this is more fair to the creators. You can actually have a piece of it. You can win alongside with us. All that sort of exciting stuff. We'll give them that pitch after. We're going to focus on just getting great entertainment out there first, so that people's heart is in it, that they have a reason to listen to us and care about how this stuff actually comes together and some of the under the hood mechanics,
Well, I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah. Living and learning, always.
So is Ringo your favorite Beatle?
I gotta give it up for George, man. Like that really, I'm underplaying how much, like, getting a chance to do that medley way back in the day, in those kind of formative musical years for me on drum kit. It's funny, right? Because it was a drum kit journey, but to really get into to George at that time and really kind of dive deeper into kind of his style and his songwriting was a big one for me. Love Ringo, love all the guys, but that's I definitely one of those kind of formative experiences for me was specifically that medley with George's stuff. So yeah, got to give it up to George, but Ringo's the man. I mean, it's once again, like it's such a big deal to. And it's funny, like I don't know why Meg White comes to mind, right? When I think about this, the idea of Meg White can play a lot more than anybody ever thought she could play, but she didn't, and there's a reason for that. There's a real methodology there, and there's so much respect for that because, especially drums, I feel like it's just so easy to be that kind of crazy, basically be Animal from the Muppets. Like it's so easy to kind of go that way, but you think about. It's back to that thing that I mentioned. Are we making music for the every person, or are we making music for musicians here, right? I think that's a really important decision to make when you're getting into this, because, there's crossover there. Like I keep mentioning Dream Theater, but like there's crossover there certainly, but there's at the same time I think they are kind of two pretty distinctively different buckets, and both are great, but it's about making that decision and knowing where, knowing what journey you're on. So I feel like the more you can make that decision and know that this is what we want to do, like Woat has always been about trying to reach as many people as possible and getting a chance to reach and inspire as many people as possible. And this idea of, people ask all the time what the band name is all about. And, this idea of there's lots of music that might have like a political backing or like might be super technical and super kind of muso directive. Our whole thing has always been, we want to make music that allows people to just drift away and put on the headphones and walk off the earth and drift off the planet and just get into their own vibe. There's lots of other stuff that they can go and find if they want to, but that's been our biggest mission, is like we want to make transportive, wildly positive music, and that's kind of been our main mission this whole time. And it's, hey man, like I said, we're still here doing it and still finding new audience and new support every day. And that's the beauty, of course, of continuing to tap into what's available social media wise these days, is like the amount of, every single day there's people saying, I've never heard of these guys, this is awesome. And it's that's a blessing to be able to have kind of this core support and be able to be in a fortunate position to go out and play the likes of Red Rocks and Wembley and Carnegie Hall and these huge bucket list venues that I never would have thought I'd have a chance to play, but also to be finding more and more audience each day. And of course we go out and we play those shows, even shows for 15,000. We just did a festival in Quebec up here for like 100,000 plus people, which was a wild experience. But we're always going to reach more people through online, right? So it's cool to continually be finding new and exciting ways to get our content out there and to reach the masses. It's funny when we'll do like, we've done an Iron Maiden cover, and then we'll do like the chart topping pop song cover. We'll kind of do everything, and then we'll hear that feedback from consumers of those groups where it's like, hey, I'm a total metalhead, like, Iron Maiden head. I've never heard of you guys, but for something about the way that you guys reimagined this tune that I really love, and now I'm into your other stuff, and now I like your Taylor Swift acapella cover too. Like, what a cool thing to kind of like almost trick people, or like, like I said, Trojan horse people into liking pop music or liking music that they may never have enjoyed just based on, and we don't even necessarily know why it is. I think we're too close to it to be like, yeah, the reason why you like it is this. I would love to know why we've been able to kind of garner such a nice, overwhelmingly positive response from people over the years. There's something about it. The best kind of way we've been able to think about it is that a lot of people tell us, especially with the more videos that basically just look like we're hanging out around the house and we just threw up a camera and we're just kind of using crazy stuff to make sounds. That stuff, the reality there is that we spend like a lot of time focusing on those arrangements, and really like we do up these boards that almost look like, like the memes where it's like it's the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the like conspiracy theory thing where you've got like you're connecting with yarn all the dots. Some of our arrangement boards look like that because it's like, okay, Sarah, if you're going to be hitting a shaker with your left hand on beat 2, that means you can't hit the vibra slap on the end of 2 for the next thing, so that's got to go to G, that sort of stuff. We go crazy with that, but it's the best compliment to hear that people say like, oh, you guys just like, it seemed like you're like my buddies from down the road, and you're just like, I just walked into the house and you're just jamming in the basement. The fact that I can still come across that way with the amount of prep work that it actually involves is a pretty sweet thing. So we think anyway, that's one of the reasons potentially why there's been this kind of relatability or so to speak to some of our music, whether covers or originals, both over the years, that people continue to find inspiration or just find good vibes in, and it's a privileged position to be able to continue to generate that and get that out to people. And there's no greater feedback than to hear. Well, there's kind of two. There's one on the more muso side. I love hearing the idea of like we're starting to inspire people in the way that our favorite stuff has inspired us, and that's a hell of a full circle experience as a musician. That's pretty huge. But also just for the non-musical crowd, the much larger kind of every person crowd, just to hear that like our music helped them through a tough time, or that sort of stuff is like so rewarding, man. That's the sort of stuff that it's like I could die happy tomorrow knowing that I've had a chance to inspire people in the same way that my favorite music has inspired me, and been able to help people. We create for catharsis a lot of the time, especially, a couple of years back, we lost our bandmate Mike Taylor. And actually a week after that, I lost my mother. And it's to be in a position as an artist where we can be feeling that hurt and be able to put it down in a song is a blessing in and of itself. But then to release it out to the world and start to hear feedback from others to say, hey, actually, I just went through a similar thing and your music really helped me find my footing again. There's nothing greater than that, man. So like, that's really, of all the fortunate positions we've been in and all the truly kind of privileged opportunities we've had, I can't imagine anything being greater than that. I feel like that drives us more than any other one thing. The idea of continuing to help uplift and inspire people is like the best.
Yeah, and you guys do that so well, and you have been for like the better part of 10 years.
Yeah, man, appreciate it.
So Joel, what are you up to now? I know you said you have the Web3 project, you have your own TV show. Is there any new music coming out soon?
Always, man. We're going hard right now. Like the pandemic we've got to be careful when we say this, because I know that the pandemic was very tough for so many, and not that it wasn't in certain parts for us individually, but as a whole, as a collective, as a group, getting essentially forced off the road. We had just finished a run out in Australia. We got a chance to do the Sydney Opera House, which is another total bucket list one for us. We came back, we did a few shows as part of the first leg of a 2-leg US tour, and then everything shut down. For us to be forced off the road, it's funny, man. Like it's when you get a team at this level, when you get management and booking agent and business management at this level, those folks are never going to tell you not to stay on the road, because it's expensive to be on the road. And I could dig into this pretty heavily, but essentially, when your team is commissioning off the top of what you're bringing in, they're not going to tell you to not be on the road. So, and not that we weren't enjoying the hell out of it and just defaulting to doing 100 plus days a year on the road, which still, comparative to some of our other bands that we know that don't have the other revenue streams that we have, they're doing like 300 days a year in the road, right? So it was all good. It was what it was, but we didn't realize until we were forced off the road. Oh yeah, as a web-born act that was introduced to the vast majority of the planet via the internet, of course we want to continue to prioritize digital content. And I think it's almost like we had rockstaritis or something, where it's like we love being on the road and performing live. What an exciting and fulfilling experience that is. But the 1-2 of continuing to kind of default to churning out content, we started to let that get away from us. So to be forced off the road in the pandemic and essentially be able to double down on our digital content output and all the calls that we usually get for like brand deals and like corporate gigs and stuff, where we'd have to fly out to Washington DC for 3 days to do a corporate gig, all that sort of stuff started to become in-house for us. Instead of having to fly out because we couldn't, we would go to our studio down the road and actually do a live stream performance or do a pre-tape. And to start to see that still working, but to also be churning out more videos than ever and more originals than ever, that's really stuck with us. Now that things are reopening, yes, we're back out there doing stuff, especially over the summer. You do lots of festival gigs and stuff, but I think the road dogging version of Woat that would go out for months at a time and stuff may not be there anymore, just because we see the value of we've literally increased our value just by doubling down on our online content, and then also being able to sleep in our beds every night. You know what I mean? Like we love going on the road. Yes, it's a grind. And that's me saying it as the guy with no kids. My bandmates have 3 kids, right? So it's like especially for them, I think we all get it at this point. Now that we're into this cycle of being able to kind of keep this work ethic up, we're releasing an original song every like 6 to 8 weeks. We're still dropping like at least a couple videos a month in the long form. We're dropping much shorter form, bite size, like TikTok and Reels stuff every single day. That's all kind of like the steady, like the mainstay stuff. And then additionally, as mentioned, yeah, like the ability to, we're just wrapping up 14 episodes of a fully greenlit animated series that's going to be hitting major streaming by as soon as next year. That's been keeping us really busy. Just a lot of cool opportunity. We just did a full commercial campaign, believe it or not, for the UK and European version of Tide Pods. Same parent company in Procter and Gamble, but for some reason, I don't know if you know this, overseas, the same parent company will come up with a different product name for the same product just because. Just because the market research has told them that's a good idea, whatever it is. Years back, we got hit up by Aerial Pods, who's the Tide Pods out there, to do a fun jingle involving essentially the pods and the kind of main sort of selling points of their stuff. And whereas I think there's certain groups or artists that will do things that they may wind up looking disingenuous because they said, sure, give me the money and tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it. We make sure to always, as a group that has only ever known doing everything ourselves, we always say, hey, we're down to do this, but you need to hire Woat as the production company as well, because no one knows how to make our stuff look, sound, feel like Woat than us, right? So when deals have come up where they are very, very strongly against doing that, we don't take them, because it's like, we need this, especially on the brand side, where something is very optically, obviously branded. We need to make sure that it's still going to feel truly like a Woat production. So that's been a really cool thing as well. And for as much as we've had to say no to some of those for the reason mentioned, I feel like every time we do a new one where we have full creative control, we wind up with 3 or 4 more phone calls from another brand, right? We've done lots of stuff with car companies and various things and food brands and the whole thing. G and Sarah and their youngest kid Romeo is like this total foodie, and they have this kind of thing, Romeo Eats thing going on with him. It's really cool. That's provided opportunities too. Like there's just always stuff going on, and I'm probably like not even thinking about it and forgetting like 10 other things that we're working on right now. But what a good problem to have, man. Like we're to be busy at this level with stuff that is both rooted in music and the reason why we're all here in the first place, but also some of these other kind of really cool multimedia opportunities and just pure business plays as well, is like such a privileged position to be in, and all the more reason, as I've touched on a few times, to just like continue grinding and hammering, because why would we want to run any risk of giving it up or losing that steam at this point when we're 10 years in of a lot of kind of crazy stuff happening and losing members and having members depart, and still waking up in the morning and saying, what an awesome thing. We are going to continue to grind this as long as we can.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
Dude,
Joel,
thank
you so much for coming on and for the hard work you put into your YouTube videos and
thank you,
to making people smile.
I'll keep you posted if we wind up formalizing the collab with Ringo or anything else directly Beatles facing, because it seems like we're kind of, those opportunities are closer to us right now than ever. So, hey, if we have to do another Beatles medley, we will. We're working on a Queen one in the same chronological thing right now, and it's like, you start to kind of like do a little more research into like, and it's the same thing with Beatles fans, like the diehards, and it's like, we need to do right by these fans. They're going to kill us otherwise. And especially now that we have this kind of certain standard that we hold ourselves to, it's like, I bet you the Queen one it's going to be on the back burner for the next 2 years as well, but it's eventually going to come out and hopefully be great. But I wonder what else is going to come up Beatles-wise for us, because it has been such a kind of like common thread all the way back to one of G before Woat was the Woat that people know and love now. Back in the day with G did like an Eleanor Rigby drum cover video, and like there's if you look along the whole thing, he did a version of Blackbird with his cousin Miles out in New York City. Miles has now become like a big actor. Was just in the new version of West Side Story with Spielberg. So like we have this kind of Beatles through line happening through our whole history, and it's like, we just got to make damn sure, especially more now than ever, that the next thing is even better. And hey, if that winds up being an unofficial collab with the likes of Ringo or somebody else, let's do it, man. That's the hope.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Here, There, and Everywhere podcast. If you are interested in hearing the music of Joel and Walk